Hey friends, welcome back to week 16 of Rotoworld's DFS building blocks. As always, he's Ian Hartitz, I'm John Daigle, and it's already week 16, Ian. How are you doing?
Usually I limit myself to one large Dunkin' Donuts coffee a day. I've already had two. So I'm ready to go, John.
Well, it's even more important week than typical because it's fantasy championship and the season-long stuff we're grinding, and then we have two big slates. Like, it's not just a Thursday game and then the Sunday slate. It is 3 games on a big Saturday slate, 3 important games too, and exciting ones that we'll get into, and then of course an 11-game Sunday slate, which is why we're here. We're not here to figure out whether Mike Boone's going to start for season long and win championships on Monday. We're here because we're trying to make people money, whether it's for an extra bottle of wine or to pay rent on Saturday and Sunday. So we usually like to start this out with a Thursday slate, but as we said, it's a big Saturday one. So actually, let's spend some time talking about each game on Saturday.
For sure, man. DFS, every day is a championship, so go get yourself that money. But yeah, we'll start with Texans-Buccaneers. Easily the highest projected game on this Saturday
And I want to
slate.
say that it's a big picture thought because if you look at the rest of the games that we'll be discussing, I don't think, unless you can make a case for Garoppolo or someone as we move on here, I don't think you can play anyone but Watson or Winston on this Saturday slate because no one can match their productivity. Unless you tell me you have something, okay, you have something in the bag then, good, I'm willing to hear it, okay.
All right, my one thing, I'm with you like normally. Cash games, if you just want to do that and take down some 50-50s, like for sure, by all means, Watson, Winston deservedly had the higher projections, but like Josh Allen's, I talk about this every week, I feel like, but his rushing floor is just too high to ignore. He is literally the Bills' vulture. He is their running back inside the 10-yard line. This year, Devin Singletary has 3 rushes inside the 10-yard line. Frank Gore and Josh Allen have 28. Like, it's, we saw it last week. I mean, they do design QB draws, sweeps, whatever, but he is like their battering ram inside the 5-10-yard line. So, yeah, I mean, the New England matchup is awful. It's clearly not as good as facing the Texans or Buccaneers secondary. But, like Allen, we know he's capable of throwing for 200 yards, maybe a touchdown or 2, running one in. And I think there is a scenario where he leads these quarterbacks in points on the slate. It's only 3 games. If you're trying to take down a GPP, maybe Josh is your guy.
I agree with you. Having said that, I'm not going to speak further on it because I just think personally, I don't think I can get away, even in tournaments, from either Winston or Watson. I'm not sure just yet.
Who do you prefer out of the two?
Winston in tournaments for me. Even though we say that lately the Bucs, and they have been much better in their past 5 games. But remember, you have to add context to that because in their last 5 games, you just go down the list here, they played Drew Brees and New Orleans 24 hours after Sean Payton had celebrated his engagement party. So, like, they're all tired, right? If you just want to add context to that. A bad Falcons offense the next week. Nick Foles, who got benched mid-game. Jacoby Brissett, who hasn't been the same since his ACL injury. And then last week against David Blau. So the Bucs have been good the past 5 weeks because they haven't really played competition at all. And now they get Deshaun Watson with Will Fuller presumably healthy. So Deshaun Watson, I think, is underrated in that he has a tremendous ceiling in this game. But it's a matter of Jameis Winston, who has been obviously the first quarterback to throw for 450 yards in back-to-back contests in league history. But can Winston do that, in your opinion, without Godwin, Evans, and Scotty Miller?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's fair.
We have gone too long without just a horrendous Jameis week. And
right.
He's been throwing interceptions, and he's just still been throwing the ball, and he's been putting up fantasy numbers anyway. So there's a scenario where he throws the ball 55 times and still is just fine in terms of fantasy is concerned, which is all we care about. So I'm not saying that couldn't happen, but yeah, Godwin out, Evans out, Scotty Miller out. Like, we're really just going to embrace Jameis against a not good defense. I get that, but with no one really to throw to. I mean, look, you and me love the AAF as much as anyone, but Ishmael freaking Hyman couldn't even find a starting spot on the Orlando Apollos for half of the winter. So this is not good receivers he's thrown to. Again, the Texans don't have a good defense, volume. I see how Jameis gets it done, but I don't know how between those two you get off of Watson since the price is only $100 different.
I will sprinkle in, especially at min price, like, I think Hyman isn't a bad bet. Because remember, in a 3-game slate, like, you have to pretty much go over the field. And going over the field on Hyman is only 9-10% of your lineups. Like, because he's going to be 1 or 2% owned, if that. And he's guaranteed to start in 3 wide receiver sets alongside Perriman and Watson.
How much do we see those, though? I think we get a lot of 2 tight end with Brayton Howard.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about, since I think this game is so important and crucial. Like, you will be late swapping after this game if you get it wrong on Saturday morning. So I think we should spend a little more time here. And it's because I consider Perriman a fade almost. We can't bank on 3 touchdowns and 5 catches. That goes without saying.
On 6 targets.
Yeah, but the volume, that's the big thing, is the issue here. And if we do get more 2 wide receiver sets, Howard and Braid are both good enough to soak up volume. Howard a 19% target share last week. And much like the Thanksgiving 3-game slate, remember, Cooper garnered over 50% of the field ownership, and then he busted. Like, with a guy like Perryman, if you don't think his volume or usage or production is consistent, and I don't, like, he's going to be on the field probably every snap. Yeah. But it's a player when I know everyone is going to be chasing. He's going to literally be 60+% owned. I would much rather lose the slate and just get away from him.
Last week in week 3, Nelson Aguilar, when he had 2 touchdowns, were my most tilting, fading the chalk, and it just cashed. So he got us last week, but yeah, I'm not going back to that. I think, we've heard Bruce Arians say they're going to get the tight ends and running backs more involved. Even last week, we were talking on this show about how O.J. Howard, it would make sense if he emerged as that kind of number 2 pass game option behind Godwin, and that's pretty much what we saw. O.J. had 8 targets, Cam Braid had 7, Godwin had 7. Yes, Perryman obviously made way more use of his 6 targets than any of those guys, but expecting that to happen again, I don't think is wise.
And I know the link is about to pop out on Twitter, so if you're just joining us, remember, we are going to use rotoworld.com /DFS toolkit. We'll be up there previewing it for y'all throughout the show, and we'll also take your questions on both the Saturday and Sunday slate as we move along here. With that being said, though, do you have thoughts then, because you mentioned it, on the O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate situation?
I think it's fire up both of them, man. Okay. This isn't a scary secondary from a tight end perspective at all. I just think Perriman is their de facto number 1 receiver right now, but Howard and Brate have been the guys a little bit more ingrained in the offense, especially than everyone else that we're talking about, in terms of Justin Watson, Ishmael Hyman, and even the running backs. So, we're going to see both Brate and Howard have a near every down role, and especially compared to the other tight ends on this slate. I want them over Tyler Higbee, just in terms of, again, playing DFS, playing salaries, playing ownership, maybe not season long, but I want them over Higbee. And it's tough to get off of Kittle, but I think you can even flex these guys just because they're going to be used as more receivers than actual tight ends this week.
What about, let's move on here to the Bills-Patriots game, because you said you like Josh Allen in tournaments as well. Is there any other piece in this Bills offense, given the tough matchup, you would go to?
Yeah, it's Cole Beasley. If you look back at when these teams played earlier in the year, Beasley rung up like 12 or 13 targets, and that was with Jonathan Jones and shadow covers in the slot. Look who's been out of practice all week with a groin injury, none other than Mr. Jonathan Jones. So obviously, incredibly talented Patriots defense. I don't want to mess around with the Smokey versus Stephon Gilmore matchup at all. Is John Brown probably good enough to win it for a couple snaps? Yes, but just with an, not very accurate quarterback for stretches this year. With that matchup, it's just, I don't think there's enough of a ceiling to warrant it. So I think Cole Beasley, and yeah, honestly, I think that's who you go to. Small slate. I haven't seen what your boy Isaiah McKenzie's only 3K. That's interesting.
He's minimum. The only thing is, Robert Foster isn't too involved, but Robert Foster comes in for 2 snaps and gets a 20-yard throw on every single route.
Winds up with 80 air yards.
Yeah, every single game. But hey, the short slate, if you want to just sprinkle in GPP plays, I guess he's not a bad 0.5% guy. For me, though, I think it's Singletary that I trust against the Patriots front 7. Even in that game last week, Joe Mixon rushed for over 120 yards, and we'll discuss him when we get to the Sundays part of this show. But I like Singletary given the usage. And then on the other side of the ball, I know on model Sony Michel pops, but it's just a game that I would much rather either go down with James White's potential workload. And James White, we've seen his floor. It's a disaster. Yeah. But I'd much rather just hope that they use him more, or in a small slate as well. Remember, I think Rex Burkhead, sprinkling him in isn't a bad option either.
What about N'Keal Harry?
What do you think about N'Keal Harry?
So we just saw a shift in the Patriots wide receiver usage last week. We had Sanu at 86% snaps, Edelman 62, N'Keal 58. Dorsett and Jacoby Myers are more or less benched. They were under 15% snaps each. So I think they're moving forward with this Edelman, Sanu, N'Keal Harry 3 wide receiver set. The targets haven't really been there for Harry, but he's just that one guy in the offense that I think even before the season started, we were like, hey, this could be their red zone, Gronk-esque, Josh Gordon-esque weapon. He's got a bigger body. We've already seen him make a few really nice contested catches. Should have had the 1 touchdown where, he stepped out of bounds, but they said he didn't. Or they said he did. You know what I'm saying. But he's only 4K. he hasn't had these deep balls or these contested catch touchdowns yet, but like that's what they want him to do. So I'm kind of, you're taking a little bit of a leap of faith because we haven't seen him get these 8 targets and have a big blow up game yet. But, I think that's the guy they want him to be here. He's not going to see shadow coverage from Tre'Davious White. So I think, 50% of his routes against a corner he can probably win. At only 4K. That's what this game, I understand Houston, Tampa gives you so much more upside all around, but there's from Josh Allen to N'Keal. I don't hate the Singletary call either at only 5.5. There's cheap options you can complement your lineup with in this game.
And I think given Edelman's usage from last week, like an 11-week low in snaps, as you said, a shift with their wide receivers, and the fact that Edelman is probably more banged up than he's been his entire career. He's limping at practice. They said he received extra treatment before having 2 catches last week against the Bengals. He's clearly injured right now. He'll be out there for every game, for every snap, since it's must win basically to get the first round bye for the Patriots. But how impactful will he be? So yeah, I like the Harry call a lot, especially if everyone's going to focus towards Edelman. But let's wrap up the Saturday slate with one of the more intriguing games, and that's the Rams-Niners, because it does have a total of 45.5. However, despite game script, I do like Gurley in this potential matchup. And once again, you're seeing it on your screen for rotoworld.com/DFS as we look at starting lineups and projections here. Gurley, the most interesting thing, as we know, they shifted their backfield the past 5 weeks. In that 5 weeks, he's played 2 games, 96% of their snaps. And the Rams in those 2 games were outscored 27-89, meaning that even when they get blown out, and game script entails that they could probably get blown out in this game, it is Gurley's backfield and no one else. They're not going to Malcolm Brown. They're not going to Darrell Henderson. So no matter what game script is and no matter what situation is, cash games and tournaments, I just think Gurley is like a 20-touch back. You lock in no matter what.
Yeah, and we kind of saw this last week in that Cowboys game. When they get inside the 5-10 yard line, too, they are looking to get him in the end zone. Gurley's a PPR RB12 on the season. It hasn't been pretty.
Crazy.
But, hey, he's produced. He's, efficiency's down, pass game works down, but mostly just those short touchdowns have kind of kept him afloat. Also on the Rams, I don't want to touch any wide receiver other than Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. Those are the only guys with those true 3-down rolls. I'm inclined to fade Higbee, obviously, if Gerald Everett is back, even if he's not, but it does look like Everett, who practiced in full on Wednesday, he should be back. That's going to muddle up that situation. And then, so the matchup is tough, but I will say this. We didn't give enough credit to, I guess, these injuries on the 49ers defense last week in that Falcons game. They were also coming off that emotional win over the Saints. That was a letdown spot. I think in hindsight, we should have seen coming a little more because Quan Alexander's, he's been on the IR. D Ford, he could miss the rest of the regular season. Jaquiski Tartt, their safety, he has been practicing all week. He's probably out again. Sherman and Quan Williams, 2 of their starting cornerbacks, were out last week. They practiced in full this week, should be back, but that's 5 pretty impactful starters that are either not going to play or are pretty banged up. So, I agree with you. I do lean towards blowout, but with that said, this 49ers defense that we've been scared of all season is far from 100% right now.
And I know Kupp qualifies as a tournament option, but even in tournaments, I just don't think I can trust him whatsoever. Didn't have a catch until the third quarter last week when the Rams were already down 31-7, and hence game script. That's why his snap rate was back up. But it still seems like they're not using him. Robert Woods is the guy who was on the field every single snap. So no matter what, and it is somewhat worrisome because last week the Falcons buoyed the Niners' injuries from Richard Sherman to Jaquiski Tartt to Quan Williams. Sherman and Williams in particular, who are now practicing healthy ahead of this game and likely going to play. Falcons took advantage of that injured secondary. But if they're coming back, and now we have Jared Goff struggling behind and out of structure behind the pocket, it's a bad situation.
For sure. On the 49ers side of the ball, I do kind of like Debo, I think, more than Emmanuel Sanders.
I'm glad you say that because Prime Kilo actually asked, in your flex, Perryman, Kupp, or Mostert?
Perryman, Kupp, or Mostert?
Throw Debo in there, too. Talk a little bit about Debo.
I would go Mostert among that group because I think you're
even among Debo?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you're getting 12 to 15 touches, I think, and the 49ers run game we know is the strength of that offense. And, yeah, so I would go Mostert out of that group. But, no, even with Debo, look, Kittle came back in Week 12. Since then, a lot of this was inflated by last week where Jimmy Garoppolo wouldn't throw to anyone else. But sure. Kittle has 35 targets. Emmanuel Sanders has 20, and Debo has 17. Nobody else is over 11. So these are clearly their top 3 receivers in the offense. And, again, we've seen this all year. Shanahan once or twice a week, it seems like he'll feed Debo some sort of design rush attempt. I don't think Jalen Ramsey is going to shadow either guy. But if he does, I think it's going to be Emmanuel Sanders. Defenses have consistently kind of identified him as number one receiver. And when they've both been healthy, it has been Manny Sanders getting more of the targets. So Troy Hill, their number 2 cornerback, has been playing very well since he had to start with Talib and Peters gone. He's dealing with his thumb injury. He had that surgery earlier this week. He may or may not play.
Yeah, even though he said he's still trying to play, but the players are always optimistic.
So we'll see there. But no, I think Debo's the move here with the cheaper price tag, potentially the better matchup, and also, he's good and explosive. So.
All right, well, with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to Sunday's main slate. That's a good 12 to 15 minutes on Saturday's slate for you. But again, we'll be using the toolkit at rotoworld.com/DFS and running through, and as well as taking your questions on YouTube and Twitch for Sunday's 11-game main slate, which is quite thin. DeAndre Washington opened up some options, but it also means it's going to be more focused concentration ownership across the board. So let's go ahead and hit it with some quarterback building blocks. All
right, my cash game quarterback, you guys might have heard of him, Lamar Jackson. Look, I know it's not really going on a limb, but Lamar cost $8K this week, and he's still a number 6 quarterback in our toolkit in value because $8K for a guy that's doing what Lamar Jackson does is still just too cheap. I mean, we cannot just stress enough how crazy his rushing upside is. I mean, Baltimore is averaging 202 rushing yards per game this season. They've cleared 115 in every single game. They're on pace to be only the 3rd team ever to go over, in the last 50 years to go over 100 rushing yards in every game. And I mean, Jackson and Mark Ingram have been a huge part of that. Only Jackson and Ingram, 2 of 13 players this year, averaging double-digit fantasy points on rushing production alone. Like no passing included. Lamar is one of 13 most productive players on the ground. Anything he passes for is icing on the cake. And we've seen him do it. He threw 3 touchdowns against the Browns the first time these guys played. I don't think their defense can stop the run at all with Myles Garrett gone, and we saw that last week against the Cardinals. Really saw it 3 weeks before that in bad matchups. We all know how good this Ravens offense is. I don't think I need to talk about it anymore, but I think the Browns defense is... People are still coming around to how bad they are right now without Myles Garrett. And again, just 8K. I think next year we're going to be seeing Lamar flirt with 9K because it's just for a quarterback that has a running back production, it's just price too low.
The Ravens opened as 7-point favorites. They've since been bet up to double-digit favorites. So that also entails a terrific game script for Lamar Jackson. And honestly, it's just like snug. It's more comforting whenever Lamar's on the main slate because he's just a reliable option at quarterback rather than figuring out everything else.
You don't need to stack them.
Like my cash game option, speaking of figuring everything else out. No, so behind the scenes, Ian and I send each other picks sometimes. One of us tries to get ahead of the other, and the other one works from that. So it's like, okay, Ian took the obvious option. He took the strong cash game option you should go to that I'm probably going to go to. So let me give you the min option if you want to stack everyone around him, and that's none other than Will Grier. And it's not a performance-based, even though who knows. Yeah, what we've seen from Will Grier in the league was terrible. What we've seen in preseason was awful. And by the way, if they're sticking with Kyle Allen for that long, despite his turnover margin, imagine just how bad Will Grier's been in practice. So that's the issue here. But 4,300 on DraftKings, Stoneman on FanDuel. And the thing is, the Colts defense hasn't been good the last 5 weeks. DJ Shark in particular, 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. Houston Texans, Will Fuller had 140 yards. The Titans, remember, Khalif Raymond had that 40-yard touchdown. Mike Evans had a 61-yard touchdown the following week before he left with a hamstring injury. And then Michael Thomas went nuclear on Monday night. They're letting loose over the top of their secondary in particular. And so Will Fuller, if he does have a big arm like he did in his 2 seasons with West Virginia, and we know he has the talent around him between whether Greg Olsen comes back, but more importantly, Curtis Samuel, who's still explosive, and DJ Moore, it could go well. So either way, it's a price point that he needs to only score 10 or 11 points to return value. And you basically can't mess up the rest of your lineup if you have Will Grier as your quarterback. Yeah. So it's just a cheap cash game option. That's it.
Price point is so low.
Price point.
I was looking a little more at his preseason stats, and he did throw the ball downfield a lot. Now, he only completed, I think, 1 of his 11 attempts, but his deep ball rate was where he wanted to be.
It was higher than Kyle Allen's, for sure.
Right, but I remember when Cam went out and he was trying to play with the foot injury. I go, okay, well, whoever's up next can't possibly be more inaccurate, which we were proven wrong. So, okay, I got another kind of gross quarterback for GPPs, Andy Dalton at 5,200, and Look, I love this. I saw on tweet yesterday. Like, I'm excited for Bengals Dolphins this week. I truly am looking forward to watching.
It is the exciting
this game.
trash game. I will say that.
It is the exciting trash game. Everything lines up here for a sneaky shootout. Pace is really high. The combined explosive pass play rates. We got two competent passing offenses facing two very bad defenses. Keep an eye on this weather. I mean, I know we got resident Rotoworld weatherman Daigle here, but it is looking like around, kickoff, it's going to be rainy, and I saw winds, in that 15, 20 mile per hour range. So keep an eye on the Miami weather. That's why it's GPP. But look, Dalton, first 8 starts, he cleared 20 DraftKings points in 4 of those. He hasn't gotten back there, but at least the last 3 weeks, he's been throwing 30 passes a game. Should have more of a full-time role for John Ross. They're facing this Dolphins defense. And Dalton is being grouped with bad quarterbacks that are facing tough defenses. So I think his salary could be at least $500 higher. And $5,200, you can stack him with Boyd, stack him with Ross. And even turn it back on the other side of the ball with Gesicki or something. So I think there's a lot of options in this game for a cheap, sneaky shootout.
And we're going to talk about that game more. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
Mine, though, and it's not because Ski Bungo asked about Kyler Murray, but I just like Kyler Murray in general. The chopper was just a week late. Like, the chopper's getting here. It's arriving now. We fixed it up over the week, and it's going to fly back into town because Seattle's creating pressure at the league's lowest rate and now had 5 stud starters leave early. Jadeveon Clowney, Shaq Griffin, Michael Kendricks in particular are on the injury report and may not play in this game. And yes, Kenyon Drake was terrific, obviously, with 4 touchdowns last week, but unsustainable, as we know. And Kenyon Drake still involved in the passing game, so I like Kyler Murray to basically bounce back in a regression spot and just a terrific matchup against a terrible Seahawks defense, whether they're injured or not. But the fact is they do have important starters absent.
Everything that made Kyler a really good play last week still applies.
I almost think it's twofold this week. Like, it's a better matchup this week.
Well, and also just looking back, like Drake's touchdowns, I think they came from 1 yard, 5 yards, and then like 17. Like, Kyler marched them into the red zone every possession, and then Drake capped it off. Good for him, but we lost a pilot because of it. But
he's back this week. Don't worry.
He is back this week. We never specify the helicopter week. Okay, running backs. My cash game running back of the week is Melvin Gordon. Only 5,600 on DraftKings. So last week did not go well for Melvin at all. It went awful. He fumbled twice.
It was worst case scenario.
It looked like he was benched briefly. But with that said, he was taken out for Justin Jackson, who's now on the injury report with a hamstring injury. And it still wasn't even a full benching. I mean, we saw Melvin come back into the game, get work alongside Austin Eckler, like nothing had changed in the fourth quarter. So I think it was a brief benching, but it's not something that's going to come into this week. And now, we have not seen him this cheap since his last blow-up that came against the Raiders and back in Week 10. So before last week, he had only 12 touches last week. But before that, it was 23, 17, 22, 17 touches. Like, that's an amazing touch floor. I think the only running back that you can go cheaper than Melvin and get that type of touch floor is Adrian Peterson at 5K. Also a good matchup. I like AP this week too, but Melvin, I think, is overdue for another one of these games where he does find the end zone a couple times. I think the Chargers just race down the field against this Raiders defense all game. So I want everyone involved that's going to be scoring those touchdowns.
And the fact Josh Jacobs isn't out there, its game script goes well in Melvin Gordon's favor. Also, the Chargers' regular season home finale and probably Philip Rivers' last game in a Chargers uniform at home. So it's at
home.
Everything narrative-wise, everything is going well for Melvin Gordon. Mine, though, is Joe Mixon, who's probably going to be one of the most popular options for a good reason on Sunday's slate, and that's because since Cincinnati returned from their bye, the usage has been there, right? 21 carries and 100 yards per game for Joe Mixon in that 6-game span. But also, since Andy Dalton went under center 3 games ago, Joe Mixon's outcarried Gio Bernard 67-10. In his last 2 games, if you want to dwindle it down further, 24 carries and 141 yards averaging in that 2-game span. I mean, he's been a monster. I know you had a few tweets earlier this week on Joe Mixon. It's because he's been an absolute stud. And now you get a Dolphins defense who has allowed the most rushing yards. They've allowed the 3rd most fantasy running points per game to opposing running backs. So it's a smash spot for Joe Mixon.
Yes. And our other cash running back that's popping in our toolkit, obviously DeAndre Washington at 4K with Jacobs ruled out. Feel free to put him in. You're just going to cross that off.
We didn't talk about him because you're going to play him.
Exactly.
So we don't need to talk about DeAndre
I just wanted to clarify that. But okay. GPP running back is Phillip Lindsay. And it's kind of a similar thing with Melvin Gordon. Like last week went terrible, but I think there was enough good news before that we could feel a little bit confident going back to Lindsay. It was a good matchup last week against the Chiefs. But with that said, you got to be careful with some of these defenses that are run funnel. The Chiefs and the Ravens are two of these defenses that, if you look at them statistically, they're much better against the pass and the run. But when you're facing an offense that good, you can't just assume that these teams are going to be able to run on them because the game script is so involved too. And that's kind of what happened to Lindsay last week. Did it make sense? They were in the snow and he only got 7 touches? Not at all. Has Royce Freeman been more involved lately than any of us would want to see? Yes. But before last week, Lindsay had gotten 14 touches in all 4 games since the bye. Even though Freeman is more involved than we'd like, we can kind of tentatively put Lindsay on the board for 15, hopefully even 20 touches. And this week, he's got a truly bad defense that is not good against the pass or the run. They're banged up. Mike Daniels just went on IR. Jared Davis a couple weeks ago. A'Shawn Robinson still isn't practicing. It's a 2 RB backfield. Freeman's going to get some touches too, but I think GPP at only 5,300, if you can get these 15-plus touches in a great home matchup, go for it.
I totally agree. Mine is more of a guy for the matchup induced as well, and that's because Marlon Mack finds himself in the same situation that Chris Carson found himself in last week. Mack has been worrisome. I totally get it, but also tough matchup since returning from injury. He's averaged 2.3 yards per carry the past 2 weeks because he faced a Bucs front 7 that we don't play anyone against, and then the Saints in a narrative-driven, terrible spot at home as Drew Brees just racked up yards chasing a touchdown record. It's just impossible spots for Marlon Mack in those 2 games, but now he gets the Panthers, who have not only allowed the second most rushing yards just behind the Dolphins, but 23 touchdowns. Next closest is 14 in the league. They're just getting destroyed, and they keep getting worse, if only due to injury. A few weeks ago, lost on Terry Poe, which is what helped allow Chris Carson and everyone before him just rack up rushing yards. So Marlon Mack, as we know, as they continue to get further away from Jacoby Brissett's arm, because right now he's just banged up. It's just tough with him right now. It's a terrific situation for Mack, especially if Will Grier turns out to be preseason Will Grier.
There are bad rushing defenses, and then there are the Panthers and Jaguars.
Yes.
Tee up your running backs against these guys.
We can go ahead and move on to wide receiver, though. I'll go ahead and jump us off for wide receiver. And that's, for me, it's easy because Julio Jones' price on FanDuel in particular only went up 500 from last week. And it was the first game without Calvin Ridley that they played in a tough spot against the Niners. Yes, they were missing Richard Sherman, PFF's #1 corner, but still a super tough spot for a struggling offensive line. And yet Julio Jones walked away with a 51% target share in that game. What is regression? 31%, 32%? So the fact, it's just a price point thing and a usage thing against a terrible, awful Jaguars secondary. So a tremendous spot. I'm just going right back to him.
That was a big-time drought for Julio, and he's had some of those big-time droughts previously, and it seems like when he breaks out of it, it's not just a one-week explosion.
The water flows.
Exactly. Yeah. The volcanic eruption continues to go down. Okay, my cash game wide receiver is Tyler Boyd at 5,800. Again, pay a little bit of attention in this weather, but even then, I just think 5,800 is too cheap for a guy that, when Dalton has been out there, has consistently given us wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 3 production. Last week, obviously, it didn't happen because he was getting locked up by Stephon Gilmore the whole game, but we know that. That's what happens to everyone when they face Stephon Gilmore. So if you remove that, he was the wide receiver 20 and the wide receiver 33 in weeks 13 and 14. Again, that's your floor, which is fine. Mm-hmm. He's got wide receiver 1 upside. With Dalton earlier this year, he popped as a wide receiver 9 one week, wide receiver 8 as another week. No more A.J. Green. John Ross being back, I think, just helps Boyd because it helps kind of open up the middle areas of the field that he's going to be working more around anyway. And, just can't say enough good things about the overall game flow potential and just this Dolphins defense versus slot receivers in particular. We saw Jarvis Landry go for 148 and 2 touchdowns. Juju had over 100 and a touchdown. Crowder, 8 catches, 83 yards and a touchdown. Golden Tate only had 1 catch last week, went for 51 yards and a touchdown. I just think the slot is really the best spot to attack this Dolphins defense. And when it's a high volume #1 receiver like Boyd, under 6K, let's do it.
And mine is going to be it's more of a 1% play, a 1.5% play. But people don't come here for cash games. People come here for tournaments. So I'm going to give them what I think is a tournament option. Contrarian option too, because Devontae Parker is the correct way to go. But if you're looking for someone on the opposite side of the ball, away from Tyler Boyd, for Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's also in a tremendous spot, it's Albert Wilson. Because we've been waiting for Albert Wilson to get healthy, and I think it finally happened. Last week, a season-high 88% of snaps, a season-high 8 targets, six missed tackles on only 5 touches. Remember, when he signed with the Dolphins, left Kansas City, that year, his final year in Kansas City, he was next-gen stats #1 wide receiver in average yards of separation, and last week, he was the number 13 wide receiver overall in yards per separation. I think that finally lends himself to being healthy, and in this particular matchup, it is a great one if both offenses explode.
Yeah, earlier this year we were seeing him like split reps with Allen Hurns as Preston Williams and Parker were kind of 2 main guys. But like you said, that changed last week. If he's out there all the time, he's a great player. He looks healthy finally.
And I want to quick hit some questions here because we've got a lot of wide receiver questions. Yeah. So let's go here. Brad Northcutt, thanks for always coming back, Brad. Wide receiver 2, or just a flex play if you want to do that. T.Y. Hilton, D.D. Westbrook, or Greg Ward? We didn't touch on the Eagles-Cowboys receivers really that much.
I would go T.Y. out of the group. Last week wasn't great from a snap perspective. They still got him 9 targets. I don't know if he's 100%, but they feel good. I mean, we've heard Frank Reich say this week they're going to up the snaps. I know he said that there wouldn't be a snap limitation to begin with, so it's a little bit iffy there. But, they confirmed there's no more re-aggravation. And I think Hilton is still the focal point of that passing offense. D.D., who knows if it's going to be him, Conley, even Cole, wouldn't shock me. And then Greg Ward, I know he's been getting fed some targets the last 2 weeks, but I still think that Eagles offense wants to prioritize the tight ends and even Miles Sanders above him. So
the answer for me would be Westbrook, but that's also like a wimp call. Ideally, you don't want to play any of those guys. But Westbrook, I think I just take the floor. I'm still concerned about Hilton's injury. I know they said he was going to play more, but I don't want to chase it. And the thing with Greg Ward is that, yes, 18 targets the past 2 weeks, so he will be involved in this game because he is their best wide receiver, honestly. But also remember that second half, Washington shifted their entire defense to cover Zach Ertz and just left Greg Ward wide open.
Right.
Like they were done with Zach Ertz.
Yep.
Another one, last minute thrill ask, Ward or Gallup? Probably both of us Gallup, right?
Absolutely.
In that great matchup against Philadelphia secondary, which has been more exposed the past 3 weeks in particular.
And since the Cowboys bye, Gallup has 55 targets. Cooper's at 52. It's been way more 1A, 1B in the second half of the season.
Man-Bear Pig, who always comes back as well. Thanks for that. Boyd, your boy, or Miles Sanders. Flex option.
Ooh, if we're assuming no Jordan Howard, I think I would go with Sanders. If it's between a running back and a wide receiver and the running back's looking at 15+ touches, I just want that. And especially Sanders, the things he does as a receiver, actually getting downfield usage, I think I would go Miles.
That's fair. We don't talk about, we should probably hit on more big picture stuff, but it goes without saying, obviously, guys, you're using running backs in the cash game flex spot. Don't get cute. Don't use wide receiver whatsoever. Always put your late afternoon game in the flex spot. That way you can late swap. And then the third point is always late swap if you are checking your head-to-heads and doing salary math and you're behind and you know the other guy has Michael Thomas to your Michael Thomas. You're switching off just to get some kind of point advantage.
Give yourself a chance.
Yeah, you have to give yourself a chance. And then one more quick one before we jump onto tight ends really quickly. DJ Moore or Melvin Gordon?
I go Melvin. I love him this week.
I love Melvin.
There's just a ton of uncertainty with DJ. I think DJ should still be an upside wide receiver too, at worst, because he's getting these slants, he's getting underneath targets that Will Grier should be able to throw easier. I don't think we see just Curtis Samuel all of a sudden get fed more than DJ, but no, take the upwards of 20 touches from Melvin.
All right, go ahead and jump us into your tight ends.
No, we're getting my GPP wide receiver first, which is Golden Tate. He's only 4,800. And I just think right now we've seen Eli back, and it looks like Daniel Jones will probably take back over.
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't, when Daniel Jones was back, there was much more of an even target distribution between kind of the top receivers and tight ends. With Eli's first game, we saw Slayton really get fed. Last week it was Sterling Shepard. And Golden Tate's been a little bit of the odd man out, but again, I think it's small sample size with Eli, and with Daniel Jones, we really saw that it doesn't matter. Any of these guys can ball out really in any given week. It's a great matchup. And on DraftKings, Shepard is 6,100, Slayton's 5,500, and Tate's 4,800. I think all these guys should be in the mid 5K range. I'm not believing that just that one kind of Shepard getting fed last week is going to tell us what's going to happen every week moving forward. So very even rotation that I don't think is correctly represented in the pricing. And was not afraid this Redskins secondary at full health, and now they got Dunbar's got a hamstring injury. Their slot corner Jimmy Moreland just hit IR with a foot injury. Aaron Colvin's got a leg injury. Fabian Moreau, their other slot cornerback, has a hamstring injury. I mean, it is the walking dead out there. They're going to have to go to Josh Norman, it looks like, in their secondary, even though they don't want to.
Not good for Washington, but good for Golden Tate.
Absolutely.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and run us through your tight end then?
Yeah, so my cash game
by the way, tight end this week is like top heavy, but finding cheaper guys because Greg Olsen kind of took Ian Thomas away from us. It's super tough on the main slate.
Cheap's tough, but look, guys, fantasy football doesn't have to be hard. You play tight ends that are facing the Arizona Cardinals. We have seen this all season. And once again, just, Jacob Hollister, 4,200. I think is more than reasonable enough. I think Austin Hooper is going to be pretty chalky too. So this is actually a play that most weeks would be a lot higher owned. I think it's actually going to be this week. Like, it's just, you were talking about some of those Panthers, like ridiculous touchdowns to running backs. I mean, that's how the Cardinals are. They've allowed 15 touchdowns to tight ends. The Raiders have allowed 9, the Steelers have allowed 8. So the Cardinals have allowed twice as many touchdowns to tight ends as 29 other NFL teams. Like, it is not even close. And Hollister, he's the number 3 option in this passing game behind Metcalf and Lockett. I know they're going to try to run the ball a lot. They should be able to run the ball a lot, but get Hollister in your cash game lineups.
For me, it's Zach Ertz if you're looking to pay up and get a little more expensive there. His talent, though, right? But 5 of double-digit targets in 5 of his last 6 games, and the Cowboys have allowed the 5th most receptions to opposing tight ends. They're going to go to Zach Ertz. The Cowboys' linebacking core is... it's questionable. Like, it's just impossible to predict. Who knows? Who knew Sean Lee was going to have a career game, right? But if Sean Lee shows up and is the Sean Lee that he was previously in place of Leighton Vander Esch, then it's an even better spot for Zach Ertz.
He's hurt right now,
too. But either way, you can definitely trust Zach Ertz's floor, which is why you would play him anyways.
Yeah, he's getting force-fed targets right now. All right, my GPP tight end, we call him a tight end, but he's really a wide receiver, and that's Mike Gesicki. Back to this Dolphins-Bengals game for more if you guys haven't heard enough good things about it. But look, Gesicki, when Preston Williams went down, since then he's been their number 2 receiver in this offense. He's lined up in the slot or out wide on 79% of his snaps this year. He rarely kind of lines up as a traditional tight end. And you can see the target numbers on your screen, 8, 5, 7, 6, 6, 6. There's not many cheap tight ends this week. And Gesicki at 3,600 isn't dirt cheap or anything like that. But in the 3K range, I think you're guaranteeing yourself the most targets. And compared to a lot of tight ends, his targets are downfield. He's got to kind of make contested catches. But there's a higher yardage floor and I think more touchdown upside than your traditional 3K tight end.
You talked about him being quite chalky, and he probably will be, but I still think Hooper may go overlooked because I think it will be concentrated toward Ertz and Hollister, honestly.
Yeah.
And if he does, it's great because he did return 2 weeks ago and was played on limited snaps, 64%, but returned to his full-time role last week. 82% of the snaps against the Niners, and then ran 37 routes on Ryan's 45 dropbacks. He's out there. He got 6 targets. So against this Jacksonville defense, it's another terrific spot because although I love Julio Jones, you should definitely play Julio Jones. Once again, we're not counting on 51% of the targets going his way. We think 30+% are going his way, which lends more to Austin Hooper since you can't really trust Christian Blake and Russell Gage on the other sides of the ball.
For sure.
So Austin Hooper, I think, is an amazing option this week as well.
Real quick, couple defenses that caught my eye. I think your cheapest one you might want to look at is the Eagles at 2,500. I know Zeke's gotten loose on them historically, but other than that, they've been a good rush defense against pretty much everyone else. They have the D-line to do it, and their D-line, they can pressure quarterbacks. They've been doing that. The problem is their secondary can't stop anyone.
Right.
I'm worried about Dak Prescott. I know Jerry Jones and everyone tells us not to worry. They always tell us not to worry. They told us there was no way Tony Romo had a broken back the day before he did.
So Dak Prescott, update through Thursday, we have Cooper Rush taking the first team reps, and then everyone just saying Dak is going to play. And it's a must-win game. He will play, in my opinion. But we also have Amari Cooper saying that he told, apparently, Michael Gallup that he's not going to throw the ball in RPOs because he couldn't throw the ball against the Rams.
That's what I'm saying. He's going to play. He's going to tough it out, and that's fine. But let's not assume we're getting the NFL's leading yards per play offense in high form, in a second divisional game, which historically, are lower scoring. 2,500 for a defense that, again, isn't awful all the way throughout versus a banged-up offense. I think you can look to roster them for sure. And then if you want to pay up, I think Steelers defense versus the Jets at 3,900 is the way to go. The pressure how much pressure the Steelers can create and how much the Jets give up. I mean, if you just combine those, it is easily the highest mark of the week. And, we've seen Sam Darnold, when he falls apart, he really falls apart.
I think another cheap one as well as we get out of here is probably the Colts defense. And that's a correlation with Marlon Mack if you don't trust Will Grier. If not, then you can run Marlon Mack out there against that front seven and then also have Real Grier to DJ Moore if you want to run a stack. But yeah.
All right, let's do our lineup. I'm not going to let you put in Will Grier.
Oh, I didn't think we were going to do a lineup today. Are we doing a lineup?
Let's do it real quick.
Okay, let's do a lineup.
I'm not going to let you put in Will Grier because that's ridiculous. We're having Lamar Jackson.
That's fine. That's fair.
Our lineup, which is, maybe it'll win us $1 million. Who knows? You can thank us.
Throw Julio Jones in there. We're not going to save the people money.
I was about to say we're really
no. Just get running backs. Running backs are cheap this week.
All right, we've been talking them up, but I think I'm going with Philip Lindsay. Or no. I'm actually going with Adrian Peterson. I mentioned him earlier, but guys, AP really hasn't been bad this year. And by not bad, I mean he's actually been good in terms of yards per contact, yards per carry. The guy's old, and he's not in a good offense to help accentuate his talents, but he's doing it anyway.
Throw Washington in there for me. It's chalk. We're just going to eat.
Oh,
DeAndre Washington, yeah.
I thought you meant James.
Whenever you get running backs that are going to get every touch, you just throw them.
No, you're right. I keep getting James
I'm
Washington.
I'm not going to overthink it.
Questions this week, which is weird. Okay, at tight end, you need the flowchart play. Jacob Hollister. And he's not bad. 4,200 is very, very doable. All right, one more for the people.
Get Melvin Gordon in there because we're getting yelled at and to get out of here. So.
Yeah. That's fair enough. But there are cheap running backs this week that can let you pay up.
Go ahead and plug in your defense as well.
My defense, the Eagles at 2,500.
That saves more than enough. That saves a lot of money.
Oh, we help the people out. So that gives you about $12,700 left to fill 2 wide receivers. Go get 2 studs. You got the money to do it. And that's Lamar Jackson, AP, DeAndre Washington, Julio, Hollister, Gordon, and Eagles.
I like it. And hopefully we got you a good start with our building blocks for Week 16. So good luck on Saturday. Good luck on Sunday. Good luck on Monday if you want to play that one. Either way, we are Ian. I don't know why I said that. We are John. We are getting out of here. Bye.